For the uninitiated, that means bread. Now, I want to read to you what many wonderful reviews, but this one is from Edwin Hill. And this is what he had to say about The Murder of Madison Garcia, the book which just came out today and which we're all celebrating. Dark, yet heartfelt. The second novel in this tense series is filled with long, buried secrets and surprises, right up to the shocking ending. Come for the deft plotting, but stay for the characters, including Detective Susan Ford and her father, Will, a former detective who band together to solve this complex crime. It is a terrific series. He said that, not I did, but I said it too. So before we go any further, I want to introduce you to the star of the day, Larry Strickler and my daughter. No, we're not here. Larry Strickler and my daughter, Marcy.
Thank you all for coming here. This is such like a dream country, like a pinch me moment. I can't believe I'm sitting in the mysterious bookshop in New York City. This is the oldest specialty mystery bookshop in America. It might even be the world, I think, Brian. And so
You got a thumbs up there.
when I met with Brian back in November, I was with Haley and I came in, I was like, can I do an event here? Here's some paper, here's my press release. And he was like, we'll get back in touch with you. And when I heard back from Brian, I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, he goes, what date do you want? I was like, March 28th, the day the book comes out. It was very exciting. But like Edwin said, and like a lot of reviews that I get, you know, when you think of mystery, sometimes you always think plot. You know, it's always heavily plotted and, you know, you're trying to keep up with the clues and the red herrings. But I love mysteries that are character driven. And there are many of them. Even Agatha Christie's novels are character driven if you think about her main characters, Marple and Hercule Poirot. Did I say it right? Poirot. Thank you. And so sort of that's sort of what I'm going for. Or yes, like Inspector Gamache with the Louise Penny series. So this novel, so all three novels are what's considered standalone series, meaning the plot stands on its own, but there is a character arc that goes across all three stories, and I try to sort of change up the dynamic between the main protagonist, which is Detective Susan Ford, her father, retired Detective Will Ford, and her mother, Vera Ford. So it's a very dysfunctional family, tumultuous relationship that has ebbed and flowed through the years. When we come to see Susan, she's in her early 50s, Will is in his late 70s, as is Vera. So when it comes to character, you know, I really wanted to understand how to draw a really great character with depth. And yeah, I can read Stephen King's on writing, and I could read Robert McKee and, you know, Save the Cat. But when it came to understanding character, there's no one better than character-driven literary novels than Lou McCreary, right? My husband, a published author, writes literary fiction. And the best advice he ever gave me was when I write characters, no matter how small, they're in one scene, one page, one sentence, that I write them so that the reader can picture them as a protagonist in their own story, which means give them characteristics through dialogue, through vernacular, through movement, through subtext, that makes them come alive. And when you write a mystery, you think of Agatha Christie mysteries, there's a lot of characters. You've got suspects, you've got witnesses, you've got friends and family, you've, you know, interrogations going on, and generally a police force. Every character has to be unique, not a caricature, but, you know, you truly have to kind of feel them as real human beings. The Murder of Madison Garcia takes place in Monticello, New York, but because Madison and her husband Raphael live in Brooklyn Heights on Skirmahorn Street, which might actually be Cobble Hill, they have to come into Brooklyn. And so I do have a lot of Brooklyn landmarks in this novel. What I'd like to do really quickly, because I want everybody to kind of mill around, I just want to like do 5-10 minutes of reading, is give you two perspectives. One is Madison. So even though Madison is the victim, she's found dead in the opening scene, or the second scene. Her point of view is revealed through her journal. So interspersed between the main chapters, you get to learn who Madison is. I didn't want her to just be some flat victim. Like, again, it's a character-driven novel. You should really understand all the characters. Whether you end up liking her or hating her, that's up to you. I kind of feel she's on a redemption journey, and I hope you do too. The other scene I'm going to read from is a little further into the book, but it's just a really good scene between Will and Susan. And I think that's important because that's really what the whole book is about. It's about the relationship between father and daughter. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read from Madison first. So this is a journal, so you get a little sense of who she is. My vision is really messed up. Madison, Monday, January 14th, 2019. My first journal entry, yay for me. I read somewhere that journaling can help resolve personal issues. Not sure how jotting down my thoughts and activities will resolve the mess that I'm in, or about to get in. But okay, sure, I'm game. The bottom line is this, I need to come clean. I just need a little more time. And I know it's soon or never. I think it was Irma Bombeck who said, guilt is the gift that keeps on giving. Amen, sister. But this is a gift I need to return. And that's where you come in, dear journal. Help me weigh the pros and cons. Do I tell the truth or let sleeping dogs lie? So where do I start? Maybe I'll leave the heavy stuff for another day when I get the hang of this. I'll be positive and happy for now, and I'll talk about my favorite topic for a bit. Me. I'm 28. I turn 28 next month. A strange age. Too old for music festivals, too young for garden parties, too old for reckless partying, too young for country club soirees. An age where it feels most people have set a path for themselves and are steadfastly sticking to whatever they set out to do. I didn't set out to be a copywriter. I fell into the role. Had a bunch of internships at ad agencies while in college, was assigned copy tasks. The writing came easy, naturally even. Need a catchy headline? I'm your gal. Need convincing ad copy? My pen was at the ready. Need a snappy line for that Insta post? I'm the queen of captioning. My bosses would say, oh, Madison, you are so good at this. I didn't get to choose my profession. It chose me. Was there a different path to follow? One that would have led me in a more fulfilling direction? At least I can take solace in the fact that I can't hurt anyone in my field of work. Well, unless I make a false claim about a product and that turns out to be harmful, or my pen flies out of my hand and pokes someone in the eye. Is my marriage like my career? Did I choose Raphael, or did he choose me? The answer is as plain and simple as vanilla ice cream. I set my sights on him. He had this bad boy reputation, and he was just so sexy. And I knew my parents would be dead set against us dating. 3 for 3, ticked off all the teenage rebellion boxes. It didn't matter that he was dating someone else at the time. I wanted him, and I usually get what I wanted. So yes, at first Raphael was a conquest. But let me make this perfectly clear, dear journal. I love Raphael. I might not know what I want to do with my life, but if I wanted to, I can ride his coattails into a predictable and cushy future. What would be so bad about that? Plenty of women choose this path. Well, that's it for today. I will be satisfied with these few paragraphs and a pat on my back for starting this thing. So that introduces you to Madison, who's dead. So Susan has already come across the crime scene. Madison is dead. And her father knows Madison's grandparents, but it is made perfectly clear to him that he is not to be involved in the case in the way that he was the first go around with Judy Solomon when he was invited into the case, because it was his original cold case. Thursday, July 4th. When I stepped through the elevator doors into the lobby of the Brooklyn Marriott, I couldn't believe who I saw lounging on a couch near the reception desk. What in the world are you doing here, I asked. Dad jumped up. Okay, Susan, don't be mad. A couple of the guys came down to Brooklyn wanting to watch the fireworks tonight, and I hitched a ride. I knew you were headed over to Madison's place this morning to have a look-see, and I told you Irving wants me involved. And I thought this was an unobtrusive way to insert myself. You can just think of it as keeping you company. Keeping me company? That's an interesting way of putting it. I kept my annoyance in check, although clearly some amount of irritation leaked through. When did you get down here? Last night. And you stayed here at the Marriott? No, the guy's got an Airbnb. Airbnb? Yeah, it's this. You know what it is, Dad. I'm just surprised you do. He raked his hands through his hair, overdue for a haircut, reached the lower part of his neck and hung carelessly over his ears. Come on, Susan. It's this or me getting involved in a more official capacity as his hired private detective. I don't know. It's not like I'm entering some drug den. We're simply going over to a lovely brownstone in Brooklyn Heights to get a glimpse into Madison's life. He grinned, then gently elbowed me. Come on, it'll be fun. We make a good team. Like Nick and Nora Charles. Well, more like Veronica Mars. Who? Never mind. I rolled my eyes. He had won this round. Let's just go. Raphael and Madison lived in a brownstone on Skirmihart Street, a 10-minute walk from the hotel. I had told Raphael I would stop by at 10 o'clock. My objective was to find the journal or letters or something that would hint at some trouble in Madison's life. Of course, Raphael could have purged his quarters of this incriminating evidence, but sometimes suspects don't even know what they're looking for, overlook the items of interest to investigators. He insisted he had not gone through her things, knowing it would make him look bad and feel worse. Dad, you are accompanying me as an observer. Got it? I said as we climbed the 9 steps to the front door of the 4-story edifice. He raised his hand, palm down to his forehead, then saluted. Aye, aye, Detective Ford. I turned away and privately scowled before ringing the doorbell. We were buzzed into the hallway. We climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor and knocked on a door with a golden number 1 affixed above the peephole. Raphael flung the door open and led us down a short hallway into a spacious living room. The focal point of the room was a whitewashed brick wall that housed a long, narrow, rectangular gas fireplace. Although the interior was completely refurbished, the original 1920s decorative touches, the ornate ceiling medallion, and prominent crown moldings were preserved. The furnishings were mid-century modern pieces in light woods and muted hues. An impressively large Persian rug provided a burst of color, crimson and gold, to offset the quieter tones of the space. On the far side of the room, a pair of French doors led to a cantilevered balcony overlooking a garden patio below, accessible by a metal spiral staircase. Dad knocked into my arm as he scooted past me to check out the view. He nudged me just enough to raise my ire. Giving him access like this was crazy. In that slight shove, I felt an escalation from mere presence to giant pain in the ass. Instead of me doing him a favor, I was starting to believe I got snookered. Was he Irving's obedient servant, hired expressly to keep an eye on me? Which was pretty insulting, come to think of it. I can go on if you guys want, but that's sort of like where I am.
Well, now we're intrigued to buy it.
Yeah, I was gonna go another page, but I'd rather answer questions, but honestly, I keep reading with these like really bad content pages and talk quiet. So does anybody have any questions?
Do you ever read it aloud while you're in the writing process?
Yes. So I would say when towards the end, probably towards the end of like before I submit it to my editor, I will always do an out loud read, which you guys heard me do, and it helps me just make sure that actually that the dialogue sounds natural, like that's the most important thing, or subtext is missing. But I do read it out loud to catch sort of like phrases that just don't sound right. Yes.
May I ask a 2-part question, Marcy?
Yeah.
They kind of went to each other. The first part is, do you get ideas from news stories, past or present? And what's your routine when you write? Do you get up at the same time every day? Do you turn the computer on at a certain point? Do you have a bottle of orange juice nearby?
I don't eat breakfast. I have 2 cups of coffee. So for the Disappearance of Trudy Solomon, that was based on a news story. It was actually a story of a woman who went missing. She was a waitress at the Concord Hotel, and 40 years later, skeletal remains were found on the side of the road. Everyone assumed it was Trudy Solomon. A detective decided to do a Social Security search. It pinged at a Alzheimer's facility in Lowell, Massachusetts. They went out to see her, and they were able to determine, even though she had Alzheimer's, that she was this woman. Her name was her real name was Flora Stevens. And I thought to myself, what happened to her? What happened to her in those intervening 40 years? Like, you know, she just disappeared and she can't tell anybody her story. And so that was the seed for that idea. I was like, well, you know, I'll make it a detective series. And because my dad was, you know, he played a huge part in my life at the hotel in the Catskills, I think the idea of a father-daughter detective team came very quickly. A cold case where the father was the original detective on the case, and Susan, who's a current investigator with the Monticello Police Department. So that's how that came together. The idea for this was not a news story. It was, well, first of all, when that book came out, I had no intention of writing a series. And Publishers Weekly came out with a review, and the opening line of the review was, "This enticing series launch." And my publisher called me and said, is this a series? I'm like, well, you tell me, like, why do they think it's a series? And like, because you have a really strong female protagonist, and in police procedurals are often series. So I said, okay, well, you know what? I actually have an idea. I did want to change the family dynamic, which is why you see sort of that tension between Susan and Will, and in some ways, in the first novel, it's a very contentious relationship with her mother, and they find a way towards each other, and you see that work its way out through this novel. I'll tell you a little about the third novel. But for this one, the idea was, I got a phone call from an unknown number, and it said, unknown number, Cleveland, Ohio. So I reverse looked up that number, I was just curious, and I got a name. His name was John Smith, and I went onto Facebook, and there was a John Smith from Cleveland, Ohio, and I thought to myself, well, it was a lockdown site, and all I can see were pictures. And I wasn't that curious, but then I thought to myself, what if a police officer, Susan, received a phone call from an unknown number, knew where it was located, and missed it from the night before, got up the next morning, because she's very sick in this book, by the way. She has a really bad cold. It sort of drains her. It makes everything that much harder. It's very humid. She's sick. So she's working against that as well. So she's ill, and so she doesn't catch the call. The next morning, she's called to a crime scene, and it's Madison Garcia. So what would happen? What would happen if she had picked up the call? What was Madison going to tell her that might have saved her life? And so she goes to the crime scene, and I don't want to give too much away. I mean, it is the opening scene, but they find her phone, and she makes the connection, and she's like, "Oh, whoa! Like, this woman called me last night." Of course, her dad knows the grandparents, so that's how he gets himself into it. My process is, I write in the morning, only because I'm a morning person. I'm really tired in the afternoon, so I write. I get up and I get myself 2 cups of coffee, and I probably write for like 3 or 4 hours, or edit, or whatever I need to do with the manuscript. And in the afternoon, I'm generally doing marketing. So I'm creating social media assets and booking book tour events, and so I'm really thinking about marketing in the afternoon because my brain is just fried by then for writing. I mean, unless I'm on like some crazy, or if I'm on a deadline for editing, I might work into the afternoon. But for the most part, I generally put around 1 o'clock.
Does your publisher help you along the way, or they stay clear?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Do they give insight? Like, do they give you an editor to work?
Oh yes. Oh okay. Yeah. So so I'm assigned an editor, and my editor is a woman named Helga Shire. She's just fabulous. And so after you submit your manuscript to a publisher, they then do what's called a developmental edit. So she's with the novel for about 6 weeks, maybe more, depending on how much work needs to be done. And she's just putting her thoughts on paper. And this is not line editing or copy editing. This is like 50,000 foot view of what needs to happen in the book. And so when I receive that back from the editor, it's called the letter, the editor's letter, and it makes you feel like shit about your book. It's everything. No, there's a few nice things in it, but overall, it's really supposed to make you think, to drive this book to be a better book. So she's saying, this feels like it's missing, or this is, or, you know, what? In my third, a good example of this, in my third book, when I submitted it, she said, where's Vera, the mother? And I said, she had a very small role, like almost insignificant role. And my editor was like, no. Vera has a very big role, and she needs to drive Susan's personal journey. And I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, okay, I have an idea for how Vera can be introduced in the book. So that meant rethinking sort of like, where does she come in? How does that move the plot? So that's what she's looking at, like the big picture stuff, and she throws it back at me. So the third story in the series is called The Summer of Love and Death. It's actually two timelines, one that takes place in 1969 during Woodstock, and the other in present day. And the case is Will Ford, when he first made detective, his very first case was actually a serial murder. They weren't called serial murders back then. That was solved very quickly. Then the perp went to jail, and he actually committed suicide soon after he was arrested. Case closed. You know, Will has some memories of it, but not very strong memories of it. Mainly what this killer did to his victims. That will be seared in your mind. But the rest of it, he just really has a hard time coming up with. It takes place in a summer stock theater. They are doing Murder on the Orient Express, and everyone. And the running gag in this is they all did it. They did. And so Susan, you know, comes to this crime scene, and then she describes it to her dad, and he's like, wait, whoa, that's the MO of Matt Gardner. And but he's dead, and really nobody knows about this case, and it's been locked away for 50 years. I mean, it's the anniversary of Woodstock, and so it's his first case as a detective, and it turned out a new case. And so he's somewhat invited into the case because he has memories that are being unlocked as she finds more clues. So a clue helps unlock his memories. And so you've got 2019, 1969, 2019. So it's the first time Will gets actually a point of view in the book. These books are solely Susan's point of view. So you see what she sees when you're trying to solve this mystery. And they help you with marketing too. Yes, Scott.
Marcy, do you outline beforehand, or does the story just unfold as you're writing it?
The story just unfolds, so I cannot outline. I get stuck thinking about, but I think maybe because they're police procedurals, they're fairly logical. Like if I'm writing along and I come up with an idea for a clue, or something reveals itself to Susan, it's kind of, well, she's going to go interview that person, right? So to me, it's just, I will finish a scene, and I'm generally rolling into the next scene, and if I can, I actually walk away, and I don't come back to it until the next day. I kind of think about it quietly away from the manuscript, but I do not outline at all. I reverse outline at the end. So at the end, when I'm done, I then do an outline, and that allows me to see, plot holes and what's missing, and if pacing is correct. So I use a 3-act structure. So if anybody's familiar with McCreary or Save the Cat or whatever, a novel has certain beats and that you want to hit the pinch points and midpoints and all this stuff, so that the pacing is correct, and sort of, especially when you're writing a mystery, there's sort of like this where the twists and the turns come, and sort of just to make sure that everything keeps the action moving. And again, this is not a thriller. It's not like you're on an emotional ride. You're more like on an intellectual ride. Like, I'm trying to figure this out. Not, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And like that's those are thrillers. This is more like Michael Connelly, like police detective. But they do find themselves in a pickle, and the whole idea is sort of like, there's this point where you want to keep raising the stakes. You want to make it that much harder. You want to make it, this point of no return for Susan and Will as they begin to crack the case, and they find themselves in danger, or whether it's a real person antagonist or antagonistic forces like weather, or she has a cold, like even that plays into sort of what's preventing her from getting, with her goal.
Apropos of the outline, though, do you go into it with an idea of where you're going to end up? Do you have a germ of an idea that you're heading towards, or does that unfold as you work?
I absolutely know the ending. So I know the beginning, that inciting incident, and I know the ending. but that is it. So I do know who did it. Now, actually, in the Disappearance of Trudy Solomon, I had a different ending because as I was working towards the ending, I was like, oh, I have a better ending. So the ending can change, but when I set out, I do have an ending in mind. With this one, I knew who did it, and that's who ended up doing it. And which I'll tell you something funny in this story when you get to the last chapter, but I'm not going to give anything away. My editor wanted me to cut the last chapter. It's an epilogue. She was like, I don't see the point. I don't see the point of it. And she gave me an idea, though, for me to at least have one more twist in there. Okay, give it a point. Okay. Anyone who's read this and gets back to me says, I love the last chapter. I'm like, okay. So I mean, like, you know, sometimes your editor tells you to do things and you have to most things I agree with her and I do make the changes that she suggests. But with this one, when it's in your gut that you want to, keep something, maybe that's.
Which was the one that you asked me about to do the thing, whether it's going back and is that this book or the next book? When you send me the pages about the going back in time, like should we do it from the perspective of going back in time? Yeah. So is that this book?
I think it's the next book.
And what did you go with?
Wait a week.
I went with Will's point of view in the back in time.
Because you said your editor wanted something else.
No, that wasn't what she's talking about. She's talking about whether it was the first person,
Three sisters.
the
Oh,
first
that's-
person
okay,
versus
first person,
the third person.
What you would
Yes.
ask me, okay, so that's
right.
different.
Right.
Okay.
This is written in first.
This is a
first
group
person.
question.
Right, group question. Susan's point of
You
view
need to
is
know
first
who's gonna
person.
get the credit
Right.
for the next book.
Susan's point of view is first person. I was asking you, was with Will's,
Because I can't remember.
should Will be in first person or third person? And I decided to give him the third person narrative.
Okay, that was
Single
what it was.
one, give a single first person narrative.
What distinguishes this series from all of the mystery series out there?
Nothing, it's exactly the same. We're all the
I thought
same.
you were gonna give me
Well,
some.
I think first of all, a audit detective team is pretty unique. You'd be hard pressed to find. I mean, you could
The
think of
female
Maggie
lead?
and Bosch, Veronica Mars, I
I was
mentioned,
gonna say
Barnaby Jones. Who did you say?
I said it's a female lead, that's maybe slightly different than most of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of female police detective these days, though. It seems to be sort of a pretty popular. That's pretty popular these days.
Oh, like
But
Yeah,
then
it's
not a
actually
father.
moving towards that, getting
You're
strong
wrong.
female.
But not a father
So
daughter.
forget what I just said.
She's not going.
We'll talk about that. I'll
She
recommend
only
some
reads
really
the
good
male
female.
driven now.
Yeah, Tessa Weggard and Daniel Gerard and Susie Steiner, and they all write great female detective novels. But yeah, I think there are more coming. I think there's more of it. There's one, the book that just came out, Killers of a Certain Age, is actually 4 female assassins. They are retired, and someone's trying to kill them, and so they have to use their know-how as assassins to protect themselves, and nobody's paying attention to them because they're 65 years old.
Right.
Anyway, so Ryan, you would like to sort of like, what should happen now?
I'm no in favor.
Right, so you guys might walk
Yeah, well, first of all, let's.
I have more questions.
Yeah,
How did you
please.
start
Yeah.
getting- how did you start doing this? Like,
Oh,
how does somebody like just start? Like,
I always think that too.
how do you do it?
because I wanted to write a book, like I wanted to write a novel.
She
So the first thing I
retired.
did was I actually.
Did you go to college? Did you go to university? Did you study like writing?
No, I read a lot. I read in the genre. I read a lot, and then I started going to like classes. Grub Street is a place to go in Boston where you just take some classes and get filled. But I read books too. I mean, I read Robert McKee and I read Stephen King's On Writing. There are books out there to sort of just give you a sense. I mean, some of it's intuitive to me. I mean, I think because I read so much, I have an intuitive sense of, midpoint and beats and you follow
And as you said, I just said at the beginning, your husband's little.
Right, he's
Tremendous. Lou is a
Yeah, I
tremendous.
mean, watching Lou write and
You're not listening
budget
to
that
the
it
answer.
got from it, I think I was like, can I do this? Can I sit down and write, 80,000 cogent words, and make it happen? I just wanted to try it. And when I sent this out,
Especially since she was editing all of my stuff already.
I was copying. I also
So, yeah,
marketing
what do you
background.
say?
That's my daughter.
Ah.
I mean, I come from a marketing communications background, so I write. Like, I spent my whole life writing, just not narrative.
Usually one of the questions that you get is how do you, pick your characters and how do you decide what they're like? Is it from real life or is it something just from your imagination? And as we mentioned in the beginning, I bring this up because those of you who read the first book know what I'm talking about as far as the mother is concerned. But with the father, they have such a good relationship that I had to start thinking. No, I'm just kidding.
Some characters are composites of people, but they're completely made up.
When
You know,
I
that's
read
a
your
fun
real
bit.
first novel that you don't even talk about,
Oh, I love that
teenage
novel.
angst one that
Oh,
I
yes.
really, really like. To me, that's reading Taylor and Haley, kind of their personalities
Yes,
fused.
yes. So that's
in that.
I would say
She
that
really is a
character's
novel
good.
before this
It
that
was a novel that wasn't published. She self-published it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, but it's not what I wanted to sell. It's not what I wanted to do. It's a Secrets and Lies coming of age novel. It wasn't like, but I wanted to do this kind of novel, mysterious bookstore novel. Anyway, because we're gonna end up soon. So, Ryan has books, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there are plenty of copies here right behind you and up at the front desk. I'm sure Marcy would like to sign everything for you. So feel free. Oh, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.